white and shaking. Oh, I can't go through with it, Clay. I can't go through with the deal. They're threatening to impeach me from my own company. They've contacted every stockholder in the company to tell them what a right-wing, radical, racist, anti-Semite you are. So and I've told people I'm kind of like the canary in the coal mine because I'm up on the internet, because I published, because my magazine was in bookstores all across the country. They'll come after me first, but then they're going to come after you. If they're going to come after me for telling you the truth, they're going to come after all of us. And I think that's the situation that we have right now, wouldn't you say?
What would you say about that, William?
Well, let me take it from a preface. Obviously, yesterday we dealt with the terrorism issue, and that really is something that I look forward to full circle, meaning that the people who are calling other people terrorists, the people that are using the race cards, the Anti-Defamation League and so forth, they will find themselves once again in a co-defendant position, only this time it'll be even more so, not any particular theories or accusations, but more the words and the actions out of their own mouth. So what happens is that the blowback always occurs. Reciprocal offenses can be used in several ways. What is happening is that in a new generation of young people, demonizing and alienating, disenfranchising people is becoming obsolete. This means that the ADL, the Southern Poverty Law Center, and everything, they can play those cards as long as they want, but really it's going to come back to haunt them because, as we find always, what the lawyers say can and will be used them in the next higher court. So what happens is the first order of business is to go after the lawyers that are driving the more predatory actions of these various professional victims. As we approach the women's issues, as they call them, I've got in front of me attachment 3 of the identity theft technical brief. And it's basically, it goes to values washing and brainwashing. The professor of Asian Affairs, American Affairs at UC Davis was very clear in identifying what he labeled as the agenda, the gender, race, class card. And right now the left-wing globalists are struggling to keep the hate, race, class card going. And the reason is to reduce the inalienable rights and liberties down to supervised rights, such as in the global citizenship role model. Now, the primary targets, as always, will be the women and children. That is a duplicity that obviously plays on the sentiments of the general population. They murdered unarmed women and children. Well, that's not quite a truthful picture. That's a falsehood. They are there, but the primary mortalities in all structured conflicts still remain men and young men. The wars are carefully orchestrated to say that they're acceptable, such as the war on terror, as long as you're killing men. So the vast majority of intentional murders and terrorism on the planet, the vast majority of the mortalities has always been men. And the number one killing instrument in global history has been the blade. So as we move into this modern warfare age, obviously the blade is obsolete and we're going to use drone strikes and so forth. The attack vehicles, the unmanned attack vehicles, have killed a lot of women and children. So you see, I'm playing to the public sentiment, unarmed women and children. But they forget that when they kill the male, that they have done just as big atrocity to the community and family. And this is something that has been carefully avoided, this context on the various networks, certainly left and right. But as we approach it and we get into it, how do we values wash and brainwash people? And what are the primary targets? Certainly women and children are targeted, 1 to 6-year-olds, and then once again as 1 to 17-year-olds for total transformation. And that is to transfer them into someone that, as I said yesterday, those with blank eyes, or certainly values neutral. The things that I'll be asking Renee to address today are a wide scope of things.
All right,
ranges from...
I do, let me, excuse me for interrupting you, but I do have Renee online. Hello, Renee, how are you?
Good morning, gentlemen.
And,
Good morning.
Good morning, Renee.
Good morning.
I told William that you had the pleasure of coming in close contact with Hillary Clinton, and I told him that I'd given you my condolences. Let me extend those to you again. And Art, I think you were, if you're banging the dishes around, please don't do that. It interrupts the flow of the show. Or that could have been to Renee or William, but it's generally Art that makes all the noise in the background. But I understand you got to fix breakfast too there, right, Art?
Yes.
All right, Renee. I've been really looking forward to having you on, because this whole war and terror. You know, when I started the militias, that was mostly men, and it was the women that were afraid of me. I don't know. I mean, even if I got on a dating site, you know, I didn't have much luck, because once the women saw my radio show or saw my magazine or saw what I had written, they were afraid to talk to me anymore. So appreciate a female point of view. Here.
Well,
I don't know. I thought maybe it was pheromones.
You genie in the bottle play. She's going to come back. You know, one of these days she's going to show herself to you.
Maybe it's just the pheromones. I figured that might be it. You know, I've got negative pheromones or something.
Some men are just destined to be with mermaids. You know, sometimes one of those rare things that those are going to work for you. But you know, just be yourself, Clay.
I can't do nothing else. Can't do nothing else. What you see is what you get, you know.
Well, I did talk this morning about my experience I had last night. It was fruitful on my end. It was eye-opening, and it was something to hear the rhetoric, hearing my speech encoding. William can talk to that and stuff as I fill you in on facts. So I did. I attended a Hillary Clinton rally in Reno, Nevada yesterday. Pine Middle School. Washington County, Nevada Assemblywoman was introducing her and had her young daughter up on the stage, Amber. And Eleanor was a little girl's name, and she, oh boy, I've been, you know, waiting to see Hillary do all this good for the women and do all this good for the future, that my daughter Eleanor here can go to community college for free, and you know she'll have a bright future. I want her to vote. And the little girl told the crowd, "Can a woman be, or can girls be president?" wow, the crowd really cheered and hooped and hollered and stuff. And I sat and I thought a moment. I said, can girls be president? Wow. Then lies my question that I like to ask roundtables, councils, boards, committees and stuff. And when things start getting a little heated and getting a little too unfelt, I look around and I really ask, were you born from a woman? Were you born from a woman? Because if you're born from a woman, you'd go back to some of those teachers in the room and just be quiet and listen for a moment, Take it in. Take all that goodness in. You're going to expel what you expel. So last night when I'm watching this, I'm in the crowd, and there was a few issues that came up to where it made me want to, And I thought about it, I thought, shoot, why? If it's not going to happen, reality is showing us right now that women aren't being regarded as that life-giving force. Women aren't being regarded as ones who bring force through their pain and suffering and laboring. Making of the baby it's a beautiful thing, it's a wonderful thing in this world, and when it's under attack by just simple politics, it's not the family anymore, it's not being attacked by, say, an older, the relative, and aunt and mother, grandmother and stuff. I look at this as an attack on women and our sacred right to bring forth life, our sacred right to raise children, our sacred right to assume responsibilities of our family, incorporate, I don't like that word incorporate, but to bring forth and bring together other families.
I'm sorry, I'm just connecting with one more station here, We are connecting with Crusade Radio. We're on with Truth Radio Network, and of course, Blog Talk.
Okay.
And Maggie.
Okay, well, I apologize. I just heard
that's all right.
that.
This is
But back to the women,
Renee Smokey is my guest.
The
Go ahead.
of women.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, the women of America and the world have a very important role to play in all of this.
Yeah.
This ain't just a
like I said,
good boys club,
Being in the proximity of Hillary last night, it made me reflect on my teachings as a young girl, from women, from aunties, from those bold and truthful people, those women that were teaching me at the time, natural law, federal law, all those things that need to become a reality once again 30 and 40 years now. One would be in a woman's way helping my family, taking within my family, not having all of those outside forces and negative forces help them come into and see my roles and responsibilities for my family. That's very hard in some people. I see that around too, all over. Hillary mentioned how she was going to battle for domestic violence and certain things like that, and she visited a shelter called I can't remember the name of it, a crossroads, I believe, called Crossroads, Washoe County, Nevada, and she said she was amused because it was a drug and alcohol and kind of a life-changing, get your life together type of place. And I said, those are everywhere, and they're all short-sighted too. But what I seen when I asked her, not when I asked her, but when I asked the folks around me, I said, do you hear a woman talking in her voice, like caring, loving, nurturing, forgiving and stuff? It wasn't, and they said, no, she was just more direct. She speaks her mind very directly, and I said, well, she's got to feel something sooner or later. She'll feel it. And that was my interpretation of it. She'll feel it and she'll get it. Running for president and saying that he's going to do all these things and not quite feeling it yet. I was really disappointed and stuff about how the women real women issue wasn't touched upon. It was just kind of laid over, I felt. And when she spoke about equal pay for women and stuff, I said, we've been hearing that for so long, and that I don't think that to be, a very important issue right now. It's of course, for women across America and all over, yes, and make it a stepping stone or something, and sure, some jobs and some lines of work, sure, if I can understand that and see that, and that's not going to change the economy. That's not going to raise the awareness to women issues, and it's certainly not going to make lives better, make living easy. I could see it fighting for a while. I could see the mudslinging behind all of this, and some of the stuff that happens in politics in time, all that mudslinging. I recognize, were you people born from a woman or not? I mean, some of that stuff that you should be taught mannerism, you should be taught how to speak good about your fellow human beings. You're in a position and voted most of the time and elected by your peers, by people, human beings, indigenous people, but you're not taking it to the people, you're not taking it from the people. You're forwarding agendas because you're stepping into a room full of collaborators already, as William said. And that round can go, go open, you sit down, this is your own chair right here, you sit down. And everybody turns to look toward the chairman, or whoever's running this meeting, and they never look at it again, So I'm not saying it's just a woman, but I'm just saying, that it's hard to get into a room full like that, or even into any type of, whether it be a small city government, a council, or, anything like that. So I didn't buy into that very much on that part. I do believe that as a Secretary of State, she could have touched on a few issues that were important to the people, not just women, but men and young children that were in the audience. And that wasn't touched on. She did mention how when she was elected president, that ISIS shall be defeated, and my thought process in there was, she, would be worked on, and who was really working on this. I mean, it brought up a lot of questions after hearing William talk the other day about Hillary, the one person that's strong woman, yes, but you can't just get in there and stop that. You can't just go in and change that. You need to face your peers and ask who's really involved with things like this, make sure that they tell you the truth, and earn your respect not as a mudslinging and a woman's story, but maybe as a woman to the heart, a woman with, morals, values, whatever you want to call them, up here in your head, telling you in your heart, and you're doing it, living it.
Did anybody ask Hillary?
That was interesting too,
Did anybody ask Hillary why she let our ambassador die in Libya?
No, she didn't get to take questions like that. She mainly just spoke it, it was more of a rally, of course, rally type and stuff, but she had the microphone. The people that were yelling out from the crowd were mainly yelling about, gays and hogs. Nothing really direct, nothing really pinpointed at one certain area or issue. She pretty much she held her own. I guess that's all I could say. Is why, because from beginning to end, all she did was talk, and if that was her main focus, and she accomplished that. But the time when you're standing above people by about 5 feet or so, and you're talking down to people and stuff, you're not really open for questioning, I don't think that's a proper and stuff. That's just my reason, you're going to talk to people and bring forth truth and stuff. You look them in the eye and talk to them, or they can look you back, help you, or, converse with you, or, that's how I thought communication was going to happen.
So she didn't even touch on any of those issues in her speech, huh? I mean, as Secretary of State, she was pretty much hands-on and running that whole Libyan operation.
I waited until the end, Clay, after hearing her speak and, the issues, and because she didn't go into them much, she just pretty much was telling people, this is the issue, and when I'm elected, this is what I'm going to do for it. That was, it was pretty open and closed. It wasn't much for debating at all, like I said, for anybody, not even any of her peers, or her working constituents who were popping with their own stage and stuff. It was just hilarious. But I wanted to give her a copy of a very important document because I know her husband was given a copy back then, and that happens to be one, the Declaration of the State Park Trust and the Land Files by the Washoe people in Douglas County, Nevada. And two, the ID theft document. That big document was delivered to Hillary and buying through her worker, what do you call the aides? Yeah, one of her aides. And when Hillary got within 4 to 7 feet from me, Clay, I straight up asked her, and we were in a gymnasium to where my voice was going to be kind of loud at this certain moment, so I straight up asked her, and I said this as a woman, I said, this came from within, and it came out hard. Hillary, why didn't you mention Native Americans tonight? You mentioned Portland, you mentioned immigrants, you mentioned refugees, you mentioned Mexican Americans, Spanish Americans, African Americans. You mentioned all kinds of people here tonight, but you didn't mention Native. Well, Hillary didn't turn to face me at all, but her aides did. And so did security. So I just went back at the security like, hey, I got this. One of the aides came up to me, introduced herself. She says, I'm the one who confirmed your attendance the other day when you signed up. And I said, yeah, I had to sign up just to meet her. I said, I wanted you all to know. I said, you're in Washoe Aboriginal Territory. She should have. I said, I wanted you to bring forth this document for her. I said, something that you pick whatever you want to call it. I said, because it was first and given to her husband when he was a president. I said, so if he obviously didn't read it, maybe he wasn't smart enough to comprehend any of it, So I said, she's smarter than he is. Can you please have her read this document? I said that boldly. And the aide was very happy. People were wanting to take our pictures together, and I told them, no. It was about 8 people around me, and she introduced herself to us, and she asked if I really wanted, that book, and so to hand the woman, I said, I'm standing here telling you this. Yes. So she took the book. She asked me if she could give me a hug. She was very happy to see me, a Native American man. I said, well, of course, I was the only Native American in the whole gymnasium. After walking around and walking up to people, hey, how you doing? Are you new? I spoke my language, they look at me and they speak Spanish to me. Oh, okay, thank you. I don't speak that. Now I'll go to the next person and walk around the room and look at people and say, hey, how you doing? And they say, hola. And I say, okay, well, nice to meet you too. And I went all the way around Clay to the far corner and just, tried to look through people just to see Hillary. So I was close enough to hear her, but I was also close enough, like I say, to, I don't know, she could have created a fog in there, a little bit of coldness, if you understand.
Yes. I'm kind of glad I wasn't there. I might have asked her about women's issue. How about all your ex-husband's girlfriends that you threatened?
Oh, she was more than happy to say, and when Bill, and I support Bill, and husband Bill, and I said, wow, as a woman, you're telling everybody you're this, you're still, you're in front running, you are the Secretary of State. She told us and bragged about her days in, the Senate and how she fought with other senators, and we had our differences, but boy, she went into detail a few times, and it's like, that's a little different. That's a little different because you were still sitting at that same table. Still that same little collaborative table. You were in that highest group. Those below and those that you all considered lower weren't heard, mostly heard, won't be invited. So, you know, a woman, I thought, you know, for one would, you know, introduce, kind of talk, kind of put down some, it's weird now in our languages and stuff, but it would kind of be like a mantra, you know, it's like, you know, hey, someone's holding a talking stick here, you all be quiet while the talking stick's being done. I would understand if you can explain that this is something that, you know, not just a woman, but a man would do, but when a woman does it, you know, a woman directs attention, and she directs attention, you know, she should be respected in that sense to do that, and not just, you know, hold down a meeting and extend a meeting or such, or a ceremony, such type, but she should still be heard and respected. She's still speaking, and I take this because of the older woman and how being raised around it, where there wasn't just a woman in the room who would make a sound and everybody would go silent. There was also a man who would make a sound in the room and everything would go silent. And those elders were teaching us, were showing us pretty much natural law. They were showing us how within a family and clan, this is the way business is going to be ran. But it was when it was taking place, whether it be a teaching or a family meeting or, you know, clan meeting or a togetherness with, you know, the people meeting together and watching something happening, emergency, someone needing help. Everything was done peacefully. Everything was done with heart. Everything was done openly, and it wasn't, you know, bringing up so much of the past and bringing up so much of the people who, not just the negative influences, but people who, you know, like, you know that's going to bring you down. You know that's going to bring up issues, and it's going to bring up things you can't face. You still can't face them. You still can't even admit or acknowledge it, you know. So I just look forward to, you know, seeing her grow, if she's going to grow. You know, I keep saying to William, do you think she's still a woman's scorn? Do you think she's still a woman's scorn? That's just because, you know, I don't see her growing from it. I don't see her taking on the responsibility of grandmother. I don't see her taking on the responsibility of an auntie. And, you know, even to the people, you know, even to the people. When you get in office like that, you know, oh, you are all my people. It's like in my family. I care for you and that community. I care for how you people are living. I care for you over here, how you're being paid, treated. But if you live in as a woman, feel like a family as a whole, as a responsible thing that you're supposed to do, and with love, respect, honor back, when it's not done there, and, you know, standing 5 feet above us, talking down to us loud into a microphone you cannot, it's puzzling. You know, what I understand what you told me about the condolences now, you know? And like I told, I want William to talk about some of what I explained to you about last night too, but first thing out of the word was, I know that speaking for him, and I said, yes, and I was listening to it. John, my reporter, I apologize to everybody, it was not working last night. There was times when I wanted William to actually hear, you know, the rhetoric and hear what's going on with people, because some of them, they don't even understand it. 1 or 2 people in the crowd, like I said, were hooting and hawing, and everybody was hooting and hawing, arms and fists up in the air, you know.
Well,
I'm sorry, but I did find a little humor in it.
I've got these trolls. I mean, it's like they multiply. We don't seem to get a good audience on the that's even listening on the chat rooms nowadays. And I've just taken William's advice. As soon as they reveal what they are, I just kick them. I just kick them, don't have nothing to say to them. They don't need to be listening to the show. And the show is recorded, and it's put up on YouTube, and it's put up on Facebook and all of these other outlets. We've got Truth Radio, we've got Crusade Radio. So the message is getting out. They're not the trolls are having no effect anymore. People are starting to recognize them for what they are, and most of them, many of them, are being paid to do this.
Yeah. She, one important thing, too, she touched on was the health care reform, and she said if I'm elected president, there's some things I'm going to change in there. She talked about how much progression has been made with the health care reform. She talked about how good it was, and how she was a part of that, and in its infancy, all the way up into its being enforced upon the people here. And
I've already given her my
when she said
condolences.
she's going to do this, she didn't turn right out and say it. She did say she was going to attack the pharmaceutical companies who are getting tax breaks for their advertising. Up the ones in Canada and the border, especially being from New York, about drug prescriptions and that going up. She didn't want to privatize Medicare. She didn't want to privatize veteran affairs and stuff. You know, so like I said, hits and hollers. But that was real quick. The rhetoric, like I said, was so, and it didn't go into and allow people to, not just contemplate in their head, but come out and comprehend themselves when they want to ask a question or get some support. Some of the aides that were around were, you're sure that you're pushing out a piece of paper and we'll like to give it to her.
My lady friend Candy is here. You mentioned Hillary, and she had both thumbs pointing at the ground.
I just got off the phone talking to people about Medicare and health care and all of this, so my fingers to her stuff are thumbs down. Don't believe a word she says.
It's interesting that what was it, less than 20 years ago, maybe 30 years ago, they couldn't even, they weren't allowed to advertise pharmaceuticals, were they? William, you got some information?
William, do you have any information on that? I know you talked about that a little bit, but when I explained the rhetoric to you last night, maybe you can tell Clay kind of how I was excited. Remember, I was excited. I was full of information, so I know you're going to remember some of that because I told you some key words and stuff I said that had me just, Go ahead, William.
This is really important is that as Renea has been speaking, it's actually been, a conversation. You're back and forth and getting on things that seem to be omitted. And omission seems to be a large part of when these personalities are going to move fast over a subject and they go on to the next one. And overall, the media does this, certainly where they pretend they may have a talk show or call in, but you call in, there's nothing there. And I noticed in moving fast over issues, they call it traveling in the issues, as Renee said, it doesn't give people time to stop it and deliberate on a particular important item and recall it. Now, when you're sitting in meetings, it ranges from non-attribution agreements where you go in and you're not allowed to take notes, you're not allowed to record it. And so someone does a fast delivery over the top of you, as Hillary did. It was basically what they call a special purpose interview. No one's allowed to speak, the bandwagon is there, and the issues are fairly safe without saying anything. In other words, the abstraction occurred in that rally, and Renee picked up on the abstraction, the rhetoric, as you said. And then pretty soon that comes to some confusing questions. What are you, as you just brought up, what are you really doing? What are you really saying? The things that a statesman would address, a matter of women's ranging through the suffrage all the way through to where are you now? And that's very important in understanding and comprehending that while the women's suffrage movement was carefully protracted to talk about rights, and then obviously the institutions moved in concert with the so-called agencies and made sure that women were reduced and very well confined as under residency and citizenship and so forth. And really, the ACLU, Southern Poverty Law Center, the ADL, and all of these people were very carefully into supervised rights for women. Now, if a person was going to be a responsible statesman personality, or certainly Secretary of State, the indigenous people, given the immensity of the money poured through the UN DRIP declaration, would have been certainly considered very carefully, especially given that the indigenous sacred estate in all of the continents, especially here in America, still holds the super energy sources, the super water, the super ability to grow crops and biofuel, the uranium deposits, the other minerals that are being handed off to China and so forth out of the sacred estate on collaborative deals. So the women, like the men, subjugated to a conversational hypnosis, and the Hillary's hypnosis is following the playbook of gender, race, clan, always keeping the women thinking that they're behind the 8 ball.
I gotta ask you about this whole women issue here. Renee, probably you would be the best. Well, at the same time that Obama and all of the countries in Europe are being flooded with the Muslim refugees, what about the women? I mean, are the women, shouldn't the women be a little upset about, I mean, that's more than moving them to the back of the bus. I mean, it's, wear this, do this, we can pass you around as we please. What about the whole Muslim issue? Now, I'm not for just demonizing any particular religion. I don't practice any of them, so I'm not really in a position to point the finger, but the way the Muslims treat women is enough for me to go to war over. How about that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and, first and foremost, there's no limit in my languages for religion. My spiritual cognition is through my language, my responsibilities are handed down, and I know that to be true. I feel for the women over there, all around the world and stuff, who are being, like you say, it's sure being used, they're being, they're like committed against them, if they're not being baby machines, and stuff like that, they're being used for resources and stuff in the bad ways. And then next thing you know, we have women suicide bombers, women too take the sides of militant style within their heads, some of them that are, I don't know, to try to explain how they might do it. It's not just that manly type woman, you know what I mean? That's a choice inside that person, however they feel and stuff. They make wrong, choices sometimes, and we all do. But the way women around the world, I think, are looking at, this war and stuff like that, they're showing images of women holding many children, many families, trying to find their husbands or sons and bombing things. And then they turn around and they see women in masks on these, propagandas and stuff, and it's hard for indigenous women, I believe, all over this world to turn around and go back to the original beginnings and stuff and think about it. But as a woman, I would feel, that why question is like, women and children, in war, in times of negativity and subconscious like that, women and children, they're not regarded as lives, they're not regarded as to be safe, to be protected and stuff. And I feel for everybody, but I also feel that right at home. I feel that right here in the United States, so safe. But I don't look at it as so-called domestic violence. I don't look at it as terrorism, things like that. Like it's, there's no reason for our language. Those outside forces coming in are perverting what I think as a Native American woman and stuff, my teachings are, my beliefs are, my spiritual cognitions are. All around the world, I can imagine how some women are feeling, when it's not in their language, or things are being born, in the middle of the night and stuff, and sometimes the only way with the family's gone, the only way to get retribution and to keep moving is doing those forces and do that suicide bomber stuff. I don't know where it came from. I explained it to me in very hard trouble. Where did these perversions come from? Everybody thinks that, the education system, outside system. I said, well, that's a pretty tough one. A lot of our Native Americans, we have to leave our homes, leave the tribal land reservations, where are you going to follow them? And they leave, they go to be educated outside and come back. Well, that education system that Hillary Clinton was talking about is not talking about teaching the truth about what's going on in the world, these women issues, terrorism. She didn't speak on that. Like I say, as a Secretary of State, as a woman, none of that. And I know William can touch on this, like I said last night when I spoke to him. The rhetoric is it's just, and that's what's confusing, from everybody in this world and stuff. That's what's confusing people, and it comes down to that, right? But as far as women, like I say, and those that have to see it and live it, whether they're refugees, when they're running from their own hometowns, their home countries, their lands where they're born, their people and stuff. And they're running in fear for their lives or their children and stuff, and leaving things behind. This happens a lot. When Hillary talked about ISIS last night, and she talked about jihad, William, you're going to like one so you can explain it. When she mentioned jihad and ISIS in the same sentence, she turned around and said, savages, killers, raiders, they'll come and raid at any time of the night, and it's quite enough so that, when I woke up, instead of my I did say a few things last night in the crowd. What I said right when she got done speaking, right before people stopped in that little moment? I said, isn't that what you all did to the Native Americans? Called us those same exact names?
I had a member of the IDF, Israeli Defense Force. He made some statements that I played on my show, and one of his statements was that here in America, we are the next Palestinians. They are going to, and what they're doing to the Palestinians is pretty much the same thing that they did to Native Americans, isn't it? And I think the plan is to do it to everybody. This is what do you think?
I think Art would be a good one to answer that question, but for myself, I'm just, like I said, having done the ID test, having worked with William for all these years, having understanding now of the rhetoric about the speech encoding, all those different things and stuff, I look to our languages, Clay. I really do look to my native languages. How do I explain that, And as a woman, it's not fitting within what my woman taught, the work, the raising, the disciplining, all those sacred things that a woman taught, and to try to fit this in and comprehend it, it's exhausting, but when you see a woman standing up there, Secretary of State, big, bold, with a microphone 5 feet on top of me, I was looking around, just 2 feet next to me and stuff, and women were telling their children and stuff, how she was totally right. That's 100% true. And I'm thinking, here's a 14-year-old standing next to me who goes to this middle school, and his mother's right there, woman, everything, Hillary's right. Here in line, she's, is that child doesn't even understand the speech and coding stuff. But here's a woman, a mother, telling this child, and I'm thinking, wow. Is that education? Is that really how it's done? And some of that, I think would be intimate. You teach your child at home, or you teach your child, those sacred things and stuff on your own, not in a room full of here where someone's, pretty much dictating to you what you are to believe. Well, and I know Art would understand this, and if he could explain a little bit, we've actually explained this, right, Art?
Come on up, Art.
Hey, William, I was wondering that question that Clay had here, what he asked Renee. I'd like to hear your version of that question that Clay had.
Repeat the question that I asked.
Yeah.
Art, what was the question that you're referring to?
The one that you asked Renee about the way that the people are treated over in the other countries and how the United States is intervening in that.
The women, yes, sir.
Yes.
It's very important to understand that the from Renea's point of view here, you have a rhetoric, and then she said very clearly that the Native American woman, and herself included, would speak from the heart. Now, the science and the reality is that we certainly work from our heart first, and the brain follows. And what's happening with the Hillary rhetoric obviously was very pointed, and that was to demonize ISIS and call them savages. Now, what happened in that mental process where you have people listening at the rally, Hillary relied on the bandwagon effect. Boy, sounds good, tastes good, smells good, I'll eat it. But really what happened was in treating the women, children, men in Palestine or any other target, is that the plausible guilt and the potentiality, prosecution and persecution engages. And that means this: to go in and apply the D5E military protocols of deceit, deception, misinformation, disinformation, psychological attacks, physical attacks, extrajudicial killings such as in the drone attacks. You have to militarize the target. So Hillary, keeping it very simple-minded, first she set the audience up and said, these are all savages. She didn't say that, well, you know, when we bomb people with a unmanned drone attack vehicle and we kill all the children and women at that wedding assembly, there's going to be a reciprocal offensive and blowback, and that it's going to be furious. So the people that are being subjected to this new warfare essentially is just saying, okay, we're going to collectively punish everyone in the country, and then we're going to carefully go in and we'll protract it starting here as Hillary did. We'll demonize, militarize, and disenfranchise and criminalize all of those ISIS people, which will include all kinds of reformers, people that are not all on board with ISIS. So first of all, let's militarize the target. Let's call it ISIS. Next week we can call it the people who like cheeseburgers. And it just depends on what their perception managers can get away with in the media, whatever the flavor is. And so what happened is that they are able to go in and kill the women and children under a protocol of collective punishment, which means we'll call them unavoidable injuries and risks and collateral damage. Now, the words that are not coming up in these speeches, these rally speeches, are the things that are very important. And it doesn't matter. We have a itinerary here of things I'm looking at. We have a war on so-called terror. We have gun confiscation, gender, race, class, transhumanism. We have immigration. We have the women's role in family, community, economics, military. So what they do is to get the women on board for their agenda. They know that they can use a mind control, values and brainwashing. And as Professor Hamamoto said at the UC Davis, the targeted people that they thought they could get the most use of were going to be blacks, Indians, Hispanics, gays, women's suffrage groups. And the reason is they could play the anger card. First, get them angry. Now, the left-moving global lawyers know this as well, and they're on agenda. They're staying on agenda. But they're not going to give women back their liberty. They're not going to give real flesh and blood women back their estate and their property. That is not on the agenda, because that means that you're dealing with a property issue. This is important because Renea has very well distinguished the difference between a typical religious woman, a congregational woman, and a Native American woman that is coming from spirituality. And the UN moves so aggressively in its adoption of the DRIP, which is the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. They moved so aggressively that they decided that they would give the power to adjudicate and protect Indigenous people over to the states, member states. So what happened is they advanced all the way to the point of spiritual property. So what does that infer? It infers that the institutions, the IRA-funded institutions, which are being handed off to the states right now in this country, South Dakota, North Dakota, Oregon, Washington, California, Nevada, they're giving, the states shall have the power to do these things. So the real women in Native American country are kept in the, first to get them in the anger mode, the suffrage mode, the professional victim, the institutionalized victim. They no longer think from the heart, they think from, you got to join the women's group. Certainly the men in this country have just as much right and liberty to follow what they would call a suffrage group. But usually what they do is the feminist wave and the gay liberation and all this, they become the pivot point. They become the bottom line of what it is to make it better for real flesh and blood and women and men in this country. And the children are of a family. The children don't have voting rights. And so there's a lot of connection between keep it simple, like an 8th grader could understand it. When you speak to people, what that does is tells people to dumb down, because an 8th grader doesn't have a value system of a parent. But it's really important to go back, and I'll circle on it. And that is, as you go into these other sovereigns, the first thing you do is you recruit the women. You go in with austerity. You go in with limited genocide. You wreck them. You cause a lot of chaos. Then you recruit the women out, and as a exodus. Now, this is what happened in Mexico. The women and children are featured in the news as they bring them here. Well, they're not bringing them here to give them freedom. They're going to come in here. They're going to be sent through a screening point differential system, and those that are going to become ambassadors, I'm quoting, they're going to go back and they're going to spread the same ideology, and that goes into the collaborative governance thing, which is not referendum processes and initiative processes where the public can scrutinize things. Now, the reason I'm saying this is that in indigenous country, the UN moved in, and three personalities wrote the UN Declaration, and I have that copy of that document. And they basically top-downed it. And the two principal, well, you had a UN with an axe to grind personality. You had the U.S. Secretary of State, and you had the Holy See. And they wrote that document, and then they pronounced it and injected it into indigenous domains, because they made sure that they didn't get to see any other reason or deliberation or discernment. And when Renea is speaking, she is going to discernment, which is that she, as a real flesh and blood washerwoman, is part of the sacred estate held in the land. Now, the difference between Hillary's rhetoric and Renea saying this is that Hillary is pushing the gender, race, class card, which means basically transhumanism. You have no personality. You're on a collective, and you will serve the collective. Now, that goes to political ideology, which is basically participationism. Right in front of America's face and the world's face, Marxism, fascism, and communism have all been commingled into a new kind of a genre of authoritarian to totalitarian force. And that means you don't have a discussion, as Renee said, between people, real flesh and blood people. You have a uniperson concept of what they believe in, what they think they believe in, is objectivity. And that means that you make the Palestinian community a problem. First you go in, genocide, austerity, sequestration, you consolidate the property, you turn the sacred estate into an article of commerce belonging to the corporate state. And that's what America's doing. And they carefully use the word privatizing here. And Hillary's going to stop the privatizing of government. No, she's not. She's going to say, I'm stopping private, and she's going to put in corporate. And she's not doing anything out of line. She's following the plan. Now, private, the reason the nonprofits and foundations do so well is they play on people's precept of what is private. So if you have somebody attack private, you have to attack the private individual. And this is very clear in the DARPA system, where we would call it invasion of your privacy, your sexual preference, your gender class. So there's a reason why there was no Native American women at that assembly. And that's going to strike a nerve. The reason they wanted to take Renee's picture with the aide is so they could go back and pretend, just like the mafia comes up and the mafia agent will come up and hold the baby and make it look like they love babies. Yet, since they had no Native American people at the Reno Assembly, they have to make up a billboard. And the billboard will be just like along the highway. There's Renee standing with Hillary's aide, and boy, we love the Native American women. We're going to go back and have a discussion about that. But what they didn't take the time to do was listen to Renee speak to spirituality rather than rote religion.
All right, let me.
Go ahead, Renee.
We've got a caller on.
Okay.
I want to try this. See if we've got any intelligent response to the show on here. We've got 985 area code. Hello, who we got here from the 985 area code?
Hello there, Clay.
Yes, sir.
Hey, it's me, David.
Hey, David, how are you?
I'm glad how you doing? I'm glad I caught you when you had these two gentlemen on your show.
I've got one lady on here too. I've got one lady on here too.
Two?
We've got Renea on with us.
Well,
go ahead, David.
I'm in the middle of a work day, so I'm gonna make this very, very brief and very, very plain. When I saw on CNN, on all the televisions at this Hilton Hotel that I work at, I mean, just to let everybody know, I'm a maintenance man at a hotel. So, this is a Hilton Hotel, which is owned by Blackstone, which is a Jewish corporation. Well, I've gotten in trouble in the past before for listening to Veterans Today and Clay Douglas. And I just call it news, but they will broadcast CNN, Fox News all over the hotel with the 20,000 TVs they have, and I can't believe that I watched on the news just now that they said Russia was warned repeatedly about the plane crash, about if they violate Turkish airspace, they'll be shot down. I said to myself, my God, they were warned repeatedly. I said that's the lies through this news I see, but that's another subject right there. What you all were talking about earlier about the gender confusion and such, this gets better. At our hotel, we had to apply the bathrooms to be gender neutral. I never heard of such things, and even the homosexual organization, the people they were taking pictures of it and laughing at it like it was a joke. You know, I thought that was funny. I mean, here they are, homosexuals, and they're taking pictures of it like they can't believe what they're seeing either. A gender neutral bathroom? All right, now I've said enough. Now you guys go ahead.
All right. Well, I've got to, we
That's
talked
right.
about...
Can I say something to that? Hello, caller.
Go ahead.
But I'd like to say something to that, and history shows us, and Western traditions and stuff, and even some of those humanity classes teach you about art, teach you about history, teach you about buildings and about all that, all the ingenuities and stuff as the human progresses and stuff. But on all those pictures, that are painted out there, I don't see in the backgrounds and stuff, what you just mentioned. I don't see that in the background taking place. I don't see. Like pictures of like Jesus and Moses and all those old pictures. I didn't see a bathroom in the background. I didn't see that. You know what I mean? You don't see that. And where did it come from? When did it come from? That's kind of crazy. I don't know whatever happened to sagebrush and shovel.
Could I make a word?
I'm on.
Go ahead.
One word to the conversation.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Oh, okay, go ahead. Because after he does this, I got to go because I'm already on thin ice on this place from support people.
Well, appreciate it. The gender class race card certainly is not to respect the real flesh and blood woman or man. I'm going to enter a word that we can carry with us in our conversations today. Heterophobic. Heterophobic is not in the dictionary. You won't find it. I just invented it. And what it does is shows that people are stymied and against the normal, natural relationship between a man and a woman, a male and a female. Heterophobic. Heterophobic.
Heterophobic. I can identify with that.
And, William, before I forget, everybody, Clay, there's one issue that I'd like William to talk about. It was crazy and stuff. And when Hillary said this, and that's one of those hoo-ha moments, everyone was like, ooh-ha. Hillary came out and said, and I will, when I'm made president, I will tackle the gun control problem. I will do this. And NRA will join me or they will be out, And then she went on, she said, don't get me wrong, folks, don't get me wrong, she said. I owned a gun. Back in the day when I was young, I was taught to hunt. I went hunting once. And this was a long, long time ago, but I went hunting once, she said. So I support this, I support that. That was way before college. It was way when I was younger. And I'm thinking, wow, I was a long time ago. I was a long time ago, Hillary, when you were in college and stuff, and you talked about your humble parents, their jobs and being, middle-class citizens back then, however, she described it like I can't quite remember. But when she talked about the gun control issues and stuff, about her plans and stuff, I took that, even as a Native American woman, I said, wow, okay, some women and stuff, how are we going to be voiced out there and stuff? Some of us own bows and arrows still. Some of us own big knives. Some of us own those guns that hunt and talk about so maybe William can talk about how.
Hey, before William answers that question, could we hear from David there? He's got to go, but let's hear the other question that he has.
Oh, yeah.
You're up, David. Hello, David. I brought you back up. All right. Don't know exactly what happened to him there, but
he's probably in the doghouse.
Hey, when you look at a hotel, you got to mind your P's and Q's, right?
Okay, it's very important to take this and then to keep in in Renea's context of women and so forth. The driving doctrine is that those ruling class and their enforcers want to have the guns, and they don't want the underclass to have guns. So the way you do that is you make the underclass very irresponsible. So the cop killings of the various targets are all okay and rationalized. The drone strikes on innocent people are rationalized. The limited genocide is rationalized. The collective punishment is literally a fraternity kind of a concept is rationalized. Now down here in America where first you push domestic violence, everything person goes into the courthouse and they pick up a form, and the form says, I'm afraid, check here. I was threatened, check here. There's no particulars, there's no affidavit of particulars. They merely fill out a form, sign the bottom, and the prosecutor gets it along with the gender advocates. And they look at it and say, oh, this is terrible, okay, get a divorce from them. So they go get the divorce, and part of the divorce petition negotiation between the collaborating attorneys goes like this: you give up your weapons for 10 years, and we won't prosecute you for armed assault. Well, I didn't have a gun, I didn't do an armed assault, it doesn't matter, we'll prosecute you. So we weaponize the prosecution in a false way, we commit extrinsic fraud to get the guns. And that's what's going on in your domestic violence situations. About 70% of the domestic violence claims that there was a threat are felonious, they're a lie, they're perjury. But the lawyers are not going to say that their client is perjurous. They're going to fill out the form because certainly politicians, lawyers, and the like don't want guns in the hands of the populace. Now, once you get the guns, then you can really go to work on them with eugenics, regardless of their consent. Now, in this, as you go after the guns with this violence, you have to have a lobby to do this, and certainly Hillary Clinton, being a 32nd degree Mason, and a lot of other things, and a lot of other associations, certainly wants the guns taken away from the masses, because those masses are dangerous. As long as they're armed, they're dangerous. And what happens is, what we're seeing is that in this particular country, there's more armed people than any other place. But when you compare the number of guns and people armed themselves, then you start looking at who's doing the killing and what kind of killings are there. Well, obviously, you're going to have the primary number one killing from weapons today is the serial warfare, the war on terror. These weapons of mass destruction, including the drone strikes, are weapons of mass destruction. Now, there's the number one killing machine. The domestic violations of guns certainly are going to be with assault and batteries and so forth, and robberies and all kinds of felonies. The misuse of the domestic violence. Go ahead.
Just comes to mind when you're doing that, when you're saying that, that it reminds me of the commingling of the dangerous attitude perspective now that's going on, and that's mingling that with the gun control into giving just more clarity on their act of controlling terrorism.
The women that have armed themselves, I noticed this in the last few years, a lot of women have armed themselves. Obviously, they're potential. But we're not going to talk about them in potentiality because that goes against our theme. Our theme is the women and children are the victims. So as the women arm themselves, they're now going to have what happened to them, what happens to all jurists. A jurist will go in and convict a defendant, a grand jurist, whatever. They convict them. The prosecutor says convict them. What the jurists don't understand is they're convicting themselves tomorrow. So what's happening here, what applies to the domestic violence thing, and I can guarantee you that the vast majority of claims of threat and violence, where they're doing the gun contract confiscation, are going to be males. And so what will happen, and it's just a matter of gradual application, is that's going to apply to the women too. So as a woman says something threatening, the guys will start doing the blowback thing. And they'll say, well, she threatened to kill me. Take away her gun. And that's what's going to happen, because the blowback always occurs. The light comes on a little bit slow, but it does come on. The number one reason why people are armed individually in any interior of a country is to protect themselves from assault and battery, especially from a corporate or a institutional or a state regime. And when the violence against the people, violence against their constitution, becomes so despotic that the damage from an insurrection is less than what the despots are causing. Now, bear in mind, the people we are killing offshore in other sovereigns, we're still killing. So the violence of this system, this addiction to the war on terror, is killing a lot of people, and we have to understand, if we're going to regard the world, we have to understand that these murders against them are murders against us. Because when you commit a crime, you are also committing a crime against yourself. So playing the feminist card, the gay card, is really has an end game, and that is to reduce the rights and entitlements to a tighter supervised right level. And that's, they need to rename the American Civil Liberties Union to the American Civil Rights Movement and get away from pretending that we're actually have a civil liberties union that's looking to limit the powers of government. What you're seeing is a academic philosophy coming out of the colleges and universities that's inclusionary. It goes to the environment where you go in, and like they did in Katrina, after the disaster occurred, they went in and eliminated a lot of people through inclusionary rezoning, which includes race, creed, color, sexual preference criteria on who gets to go back in.
I've got a film here that's starting to make the rounds, and the ADL has jumped on it with all 4 feet to try to call it racist. It's it's called With Open Gates. The forced collective, talking about the European invasion by the Muslim there. And I want to get this, I want to play this little clip here. But I also want to talk with you, William, about what happened in Waco. I mean, why didn't we have more of a reaction when you had that many, almost 100 women and children killed, families killed here? Why wasn't there more outrage? I mean, the only comment I even got when I was traveling at the time, I was going around with a presidential candidate, Charles Collins, and ran across one Jew that said, well, they deserve what they got. Those Branch Davidians deserve what they got. I go, what did the 17 little children do to deserve being murdered and burned? Now let me go ahead.
I'd rather have Renee and Art both address that together.
Okay. All right. If you want to do that,
Hillary did say a few things last night that. Oh.
Go ahead.
Okay. Hillary did say a few things that last night, and at the end of her gun speech and stuff, her last words with her, and she said, "And when I'm president," she goes, "we as Americans, we will keep guns out of the hands of terrorists. We will keep guns out of the hands of bad people." But she said negative people, felons, domestic violence. And she named off, the crowd really roared after that. And the other thing I really said about arming ourselves because of being attacked and stuff, a good example would be what's going on up in Canada. We don't look at it as a border. Why? Because it's still Native American. But up Montana and North Dakota and South Dakota, up around there and stuff, a lot of domestic violence. And when I mentioned it to the aide, I said, my question, I wanted to address it because as Native American women, we suffer high numbers of domestic violence. And with all the missing women up north, are guns going to protect them? Probably not, you know. I mean, there's a lot of different fuels and influences that are causing these perpetrators and stuff to do and get away with what they do. Sometimes, it's like what we said, it's systematic. You know, it's just the way it's supposed to be, or, you know, they don't want to deal with it, especially if it's a Native American woman or the community. They don't want to hear it. They'll sit down and go, okay, well, we won't talk to you and your family who's affected, but we'll talk to your head of social services and your chairman maybe, or your tribal administrator, and you make it right. Okay, that's so, you know, personal. That's a painful one, so.
Renee?
Go ahead, Art.
Art?
Okay, yeah, let me answer that one. You know, when William was talking about gun control, I think it all goes back to then again. Back in the early 1800s, people were really migrating into this territory, and my Washoe people were peaceful people. And so we didn't, there was a lot of stories that had gone on about the influx of immigrants into this territory. And our oral teachings always told us to watch out, always gave us a lesson about what we should do about situations we ran into. And when we had learned about the way that the Donner Party had been at one time, how they were cannibalism within the stories of the Washoe, a lot of the white people were people to watch out for. So when they were moving into the territory, when they were moving into the territory here, they were starting to mine this place, and the Washoes didn't do anything and stop the people from moving into this area. And when they started to move in this area, they started to burn up the pine nut trees, which was a staple food of our Washoe people and our Washoe families. And when the Washoe people started, because each area of pine nut trees, there's allotted areas we call them moss, and it was like territorial areas that each family managed. And when these miners and these people that moved in this territory started to burn up the trees and make charcoal for the mines, then the Washoes started to be not good with this. And so the people that was established in the Genoa area were getting afraid because they said the Indians were getting restless. And so they wrote the BIA, or the Bureau of Indian Affairs, or back then it was the Department of Defense. And they said, we need guns because the Indians are getting restless. And that was in 1859. And after 1859, that was last writings about the Washoe. And then in 1870, all of a sudden everything's okay. The next writing was, oh, everything's fine here. Okay, so the reason I tell you that story is because I think of it like this. The people in Waco, when the immigrants came to this country, they were assured that they were living in a country of freedom. So when these little groups are establishing and trying to live their own way, or trying to live however it is this freedom that's given them, the federal government or the entities that control these land masses now aren't being clear to any of us what we can and can't do. So people like that in Waco, they had the same problem. They didn't really have a clear picture of what their freedom was. All they knew is they were establishing themselves under a freedom that they felt that they were going to live under. And the kids that you're talking about that were killed, the kids didn't have a choice. All they had, because they were a part of the families, just as the Indian people, kids and women and old people, had to take the fall just right along with the men that were trying to stand up and fight against a tyrannous group or body of controllers. And also that's what I feel the same thing is going on today. Is they're continuing to say there's freedom, continuing to say this country is built on some kind of values, but yet at the same time, we look at this where they don't listen to us talk. They have a rhetoric of talking over us. They want you to listen, and they don't want you to be heard. but yet they say you have the freedom of to be able to express yourself. So this is not a clear, this example is a clear example of what and why Infraspect is doing what we're doing, is because it's clear now from the picture of the non-Indian to the Indian, we're all in the same boat. But if we go back to the original wrongdoings, a lot of these things can be corrected. But by ignoring them, they're continuing to show us they're not willing to listen to us. There's an agenda here that's more important than anything we're talking about today. And if there were some really intelligent people out there, they would really get themselves involved with this, because if the natural human being is to evolve, we have to realize we have to do it together.
One of the things that I kind of harp on, if we work together, we've actually had the answer to all of the problems for well over 100 years. I'm talking about energy, I'm talking about free energy, I'm talking about electricity. We've got the answers to all of our problems. We don't even, we even have the answers to nuclear power. We could have nuclear power powered by thorium, I believe that's the correct name of it, and wouldn't be dangerous, wouldn't melt down, we wouldn't have any Fukushimas. But then again, why do they build these nuclear power plants along the New Madrid fault line over there in Tennessee, in that area? Because they won't...
Clayton,
yes, sir.
Clayton, I'd like to finish Art's thought on this, because I want to make a bridge here.
Okay, go ahead.
In the matter of Waco, and so it, like Art says, in Infraspect, the sum of all things are the truth, and we bridge things. We link it together, names, people's dates, places, agendas, and so forth. And the language is certainly very important, because that language is very easy to tag, because it's not of Washoe, it's not of indigenous country. It's a artifact language created literally to a cult level. Now, listen to the language in this. We have Waco, which was treated as a compound, a militant compound. And in that compound, there was no really proof of fact that any children were abused or anything else. But then you have a reservation state. You have a federal Indian reservation, which are pretty clear that their economic order is skewed to two classes of people, high and low, and that's you can read their own fiat budgets and their pro forma balance sheets to see that. The next thing is you have a federal reservation, and there it is. These are like gated communities. Gated communities exist all over the country. Some are very elite and high altitude, almost like a city-state. Now, within the reservation, I want to come back to this to show the duplicity in the reasoning and the rationalizing process. You have an island in the South Pacific that's an exclusive private island for very wealthy people, their own security, their own jets, everything. You have that same thing in Montana, and there's military jets on a private property landing and taking off. Now, in the reservation and all over this country, there are sanctuaries, and these are Roman Catholic sanctuaries. And a sanctuary, when you look at the definition, basically means free from proscecution. And you'll see the language borrowed on environmental sanctuaries. But more importantly, in the religious sanctuaries, such as the Catholic sanctuaries, they exist within a reservation. In the early 1900s, there were deals made to kind of subordinate the other Protestant religious groups, and that these sanctuaries, the Catholic sanctuaries are there, and they're made out of brick. Now, in the Montana case demonstration, a woman took on the county who was very predatory in working under revenue sharing agreements where the tribe would certainly allow the county to tax her and remove her from her property for default. And then her property was sold. So she had no sanctuary even within a so-called federal Indian reservation under treaty auspice. Now, in that reservation, there was a sanctuary. So basically what I did is I said to my client, go back, get legal counsel, a lot. But the problem is she had to rely on bar counsel, and bar counsel is obviously British, and the Church of England has a lot to say about that. She was born in a sanctuary. So you can see how this circle of folly of errors and judicial indolence occurs. She was born in a sanctuary. She wasn't born on the reservation, because a sanctuary was free from the prosecution of the United States or anyone else, and including treaty affairs. So within that, especially the left-wing on board with the UN kind of personalities went crazy, and oh boy, she's subverting us and everything. No, she was a Blackfeet, flesh and blood woman who said, I was born in the sanctuary, Catholic sanctuary at Buffalo Jump. And what happened is the lawyers went nuts. They went in and made deals in the courtroom, planned participation, where the tribal and the county attorneys actually ganged up on her and called her a bad woman, and the judge put the rubber stamp on that, federal judge. That's all a matter of case history, but what I'm getting at is that on Waco, it was not an authorized sanctuary, like the Catholic Church, like other things, like within the reservation, the Hutterites have that religious dominion. Several of the reservation have these things, and in that religious dominion, it's evolved to where these religious corporations have economic development rights. So you can see that the Native American people are being taken to the cleaners by their own officials, making collaborative deals under collaborative governance. And one of the terms is a native nation rebuilding. It came out of the Bush Foundation. So what happens is you're seeing a duplicity in the entire thinking. And to engage in that duplicity, you have to think of yourself as the inner circle, the elite, the ruling class, and of course you talk down to the other people, as Renee has just exemplified and witnessed Hillary Clinton talking down to the people, because no matter what she tries to mask her rhetoric in, the fact of the truth came out that Renee picked it off. She said she's talking down to the people. She's artificial. She's a surrogate power. She's a straw woman. Notice that they always call them straw man. She's a straw woman. And how is that straw woman going to protect the liberties of indigenous flesh and blood real women? And the answer is she's not. So let's just keep this sanctuary. Go ahead. Go ahead, Art.
I was thinking of another thing, and I hope I didn't cut you off.
No.
That's right.
But I was thinking about you saying a little bit more, because we've been having a little trouble over here with the tribal leadership and the lawyer situation, thinking of the predatory powers. Is our tribal corporations, which are adopted constitutions through the federal government, so the Washoe people or the Washoe tribe we have here doesn't operate under sovereignty anymore. So it's under a limited sovereign base. But the leadership runs around telling everybody that they have sovereign immunity. And when they do this, I think about the predatory powers that come in and use the idea that the tribal people have, the tribal corporation have sovereignty, but yet the veil of immunity of prosecution and all that comes into effect also. Could you touch on that area?
Yeah, last night I amended the identity theft brief to include your case that you brought to me for examination. And what happened was the tribal attorneys advised, in this particular instance, they advised the chairman of the tribe to conceal the identity theft brief from the tribal council and the membership at large, saying to the tribal chairman, the attorney said, if you don't read it, you're not responsible for it. Now, what happened there, you take that and there's a social context, and it was, oh, well, they're corrupt, and that's just a gangster thing. Well, it's a little further than that. There's a toxic spin-off to this. Now, it's going to go two ways. There are 7 points that the attorney will have to address as probably in a defending nature, and that is under the Nevada judicial conduct laws. That attorney has to, contrary to 7 items that are particularly identified, put into the brief, and it's in the email to you. Now, the other spin-off of the poison is the fruit of evil is this. The attorney asked and advised the chairman to do a violation of fiduciary duty and concealing important tribal business information. So they just were kind of trying to embarrass you and delay you and block you. But in doing so, they indicted themselves. This is kind of like the jury indicting themselves. In this case, it's the decision team indicting themselves. And the decision team at Washoe was said to be the chairman, the lawyer, and a social psychologist agency administrator. We'll get at that, but they're following doctrine. They're following the Bush foundations, reinventing Native nations and all that. They're following collaborative governance protocols. But that's going to come back at them. And this goes in further in that not only did they do their poison, but they assumed some risks, and so did the tribal council members, and so did the members at large. By the tribal chairman and the lawyer concealing the important information which mentions Washoe affairs, they concealed it from their entire membership, which no longer can deliberate on it, and it's we don't go there, or we will conceal it. And that's the nature of collaborative trade-offs. Now, they compelled you to have to go outside of the tribal structure to address this matter. Likewise, Renea yesterday delivered the identity theft to Hillary Clinton in person, direct, that's it. That got through the filter system at the federal level of collaboration. And it also, you delivered it to 65, roughly 65 Senate members of the Nevada government. Now, you're both compelled to do that, and the reason is your collaborating decision makers at the tribal level have been given repeated in 7 years, repetitious deliveries of all of your concerns, and the common and continuous position was controlled by the attorneys, who, by the way, are linked through the bar and their education to the University of Oregon. Now, the University of Oregon last year, likewise, prohibited the Indigenous Identity Panel from going forward in the Public Information Environmental Law Conference. And the quotation on the document they sent back to us was, the Indigenous Identity Theft and Fraud technical brief, or that panel, is not appropriate for this conference, which addressed identity theft. So their context of identity theft was somebody dysfunctions in the dysfunction in the function, and that is somebody steals your credit card, therefore we want that to be the context of identity theft. Now, that's a fraud in itself. That's an extrinsic fraud, a culpable ignorance. And it's mentioned in your case at Washoe that they put the people in a position of willful and culpable ignorance. Culpable ignorance was certainly on the part of the chairman, because the lawyer advised him to stay ignorant, conceal the brief. There it is. And believe me, they can cover
and it's not going to work. Yeah, because every meeting I've ever been to now in the past 7 years, 10 years, every council member now, no matter what issue it is, whether it be small or large, and it has to do with the tribal concerns, the council members will not answer. They say, we cannot answer that until we speak to legal.
So really, they don't even understand, they're confused on their rights of titles. That's what that tells me. They're confused about who they are, and probably are just handled in all senses of the word.
Oh yeah, they're totally hiding behind they're hiding behind the ignorance and not willing to step above that and learn what it is that they're supposed to be doing. They're handled completely.
Yes, and I would like to add something before I go, gentlemen, and stuff, but thank you for talking about women issues, and I like it when you guys carry us on, because the woman and the man, we do it together, you know? It's got to be that way. But William, you should touch on one thing you mentioned earlier, and then we can talk about this right when I'm done. Clay, thank you for having me. This is also from the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People in the United Nations. And I do have a problem with that on the rights. It's not of the rights. So what this declaration is doing is dictating to everybody what our rights are. Not listening to us, not hearing from us. I would like to read this certain caption of the United Nations Declaration, please, and have people think about this. This is Article 27 of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. States shall establish and implement, in conjunction with Indigenous peoples concerned, a fair, independent, impartial, open, and transparent process giving due recognition to Indigenous peoples' law, traditions, customs, and land tenure systems, to recognize and adjudicate the rights of Indigenous people pertaining to their lands, territories, and resources, including those which were traditionally owned or otherwise occupied or used. Indigenous people shall have the right to participate in this process. William, I know you wrote the notation on this. We all agreed upon this notation. We all live by this notation because this is the truth. This is the real thing. You touched upon the bar stuff. First part of the quotation, your notation, number 73, reads, this article demonstrates a lack of fair, independent, impartial, open, and transparent process. The state shall adjudicate the rights of Indigenous people. It does specify attributions to collective rights of Indigenous institutions into people. Maybe you can touch on that. Remember we talked about those belonging to state bar associations, they're required to take bar examinations, to meet standards of the association, their professional canons, and take an oath, remember, upon the state constitution that they obey loyally, you know, and the corporations that employ them. This is a direct, factual, truthful happening, like Art just said. So, William, if you can tie that into what Art just said, or what our, collective rights are, why? Because these are coming from those bar associations, right? The face value, consequences, and duty, defeat, and prosperity of the court officers. Remember that? Trustworthiness of legal counsel. Please.
It's true. Likewise in the document. Thanks again, Renee, for bringing all these things forward, because I know that the Native American women, the Indigenous women, are going to serve themselves in a good and positive way if they follow your precepts and what you're seeing going on. Because if they listen to the Hillarys, they're going to be lost and end up hating themselves. Thank you again. The Declaration on the Indigenous Rights certainly was a production of the state. There's no question about that, with the blessings of the Holy See on it. And that gave it its papal bull kind of a flavor. And you can see it in the state shell. There's no question that the language appears very nice and very just and fair and all that, but I'm not in the mood to be fair with evil. Evil is evil. And in this case, what's the process psychology is, the state shall do it. The state is in direct conflict with culture, custom, and tradition of indigenous people. The states in the United States are subordinate to what was called the Northwest Ordinance, and that they would come in and be under the Christian principles and so forth, as recognized as existing in those policies of the church and so forth, dogma and doctrine in the 1800s. So what has happened is that in the administrative court system, in the fourth branch of government, the agencies, the collaborators decided to hand off all of the power to the states, and the trigger phrase would be domestic dependent nation. And that's well documented throughout the case files in the various states and what their attitude is. The bar code ethic in the bar involves loyalty to the Crown Esquire and loyalty to the corporation. In the U.S. situation, you have the American Bar Association, which is a lawyer guild, which is defined as a communist organization. So lefty law comes flying through the various law schools, so-called liberal law schools, which are not liberal. And in that process, the allegiance to the sovereign people is suppressed and abrogated in a very gradual process. In the Montana demonstration, it was certainly clear that the justice, the three justices in Aratop said, tribal justices said, you have in this country, in this modern era, and those are very important terms. Modern era is very important to understand, and we've addressed that. There's only basically emotional sovereignty left, and the Blackfeet and other tribes, they're not sovereign. Now, they did that to make sure...
William?
Yeah, go ahead.
William, along with what you're saying, the full circle of that is now the federal government had a responsibility to the tribes, and that's the reason it was separate from the states. But yet at the same time, when a state became a state, before they can become a state, that the federal government assured the state that the Indian title was extinguished.
They can talk about title all they want, but you cannot extinguish a sovereign, real flesh and blood human being. What happened in that federal-state association is that there's various cases, and there's one called common law, and there's another one that involves eminent domain. In the United States, in its shenanigans through the bar associations and the Supreme Court, have tried to assign the eminent domain all the way down to the municipal level. The federal government cannot do this. The matter of municipality is very important. And the reason being is that the federal government can't give away its own sovereignty and by some sort of creative assignment like innovative international law. But back here in the wings, the UN is waiting on these provincial ideas of regions. And there's a lot of smoke being drummed up in liberal quarters about going to the provincial and echo regions. Now, I understand that obviously we have to deal with environment, the primacy environment, but that really isn't the end game, because just as you mentioned, the state shall, as Renea has mentioned, the state shall, and this is not the people, this is the corporate state, and this is part of stealing the identity. And the federal government certainly had some distributive agreements that they did with entitlements and so forth. But what people forget is you cannot extinguish a people because you abrogate a treaty. And in a courtroom last month, a circuit court judge made several serious errors in his finding a look Dakota man guilty, and I'm going to address that. That is going to flip. In other words, we're going to be writing up a technical brief that shows that everything that judge and that prosecutors can and will be used against them in a higher court. And they're not going to like it. And the reason is that they try to use instruments to get rid of the treaty that are not superior instruments, but they were inferior instruments. And I'll be explaining all of this in a brief. And so the federal government certainly, they tried to say in that court case, oh, well, they were dishonorable. No, they weren't. They weren't dishonorable. They were fraudulent and deceptive. And they did felonies. They did sedition. They did a bunch of things that are real. Now, the reason that they get away with this is that the Bar Association, the brothers in the Dawn, understand what they're doing. They're not making any mistakes. And this goes to the end game, which is visible in the Capstone Doctrine and the other things that are going on beyond the public's view, such as one heaven. People can kind of relate to December 21st, 2012, but they really don't understand what happened on that day and why a lot of people buzz around that date. And we've addressed that in the identity brief in the attachments. So you're really seeing this overarching, oversoul kind of an attitude. And as Renee brought up the declaration by the Washoe people, which obviously you're well aware of, and you've been key in getting that declaration out there, they don't like that. These people that are collaborators do not view the public as having any capacity or competency, lawfully and otherwise, to make decisions. And this is where you get the rationales like burn the village to save it. So basically what they're doing is the Cloud-Piven strategy of we're going to collapse America, and a lot of people stand up and cheer and think that's great. We're going to collapse it to save it. And so what you're seeing in a surge forward, especially championed by media operative journals such as NPR and PRN International, they're really trying to get trustworthiness, but they carry it with that thread. In other words, as Renee said in the article, it has nice words and very good-sounding words and just and fair and all that, but then it says the state shall. So that was an abridgment of the allegiance to the sovereign people. You don't have any sovereign without the people, and it rests on one. And the one is the person. Even a king says, well, I'm a one, I'm an individual, I'm a sovereign. Then you have the kind of the totalitarian state idea that one man, one vote. And then you have a psychologist saying the inner child. And you have a religious theologian saying God is your personal salvation.
All right,
so all of them acknowledge one person, one individual.
We're out of time, William. I want to thank you and Art and Renee for being my guest today. And
well, thank you, Clay.
Tomorrow, folks, if you'll tune in, I will share with Open Gates. They're going to use that film to try to demonize us, call us racist and everything else. But I believe, although I haven't watched it in its entirety yet, they are giving you the facts about what's happening in Europe and America. It's coming here. All right. God bless you all. Thank you. Great Spirit watch over you. Thank you for being with me.
Thank you, Clay.
All right. Bye-bye now.
Thank you.